All right, welcome back, folks. Heart structure and function, part 2, I guess, the heart diagram. In the last video, we went over the different structures of the heart. We went over the pathway of blood in the heart, and I would like to sort of label this picture and then label the pathway as well. I think it'll be helpful, again, to sort of see it in a picture format versus just a bunch of point form information. So this is sitting at the bottom of the website in the little assignment and practice section if you want to print it out for yourself. So let's talk about these different structures here, and then we'll talk about the pathway. Let's label sort of the main chambers of the heart here. So we have, and maybe I'll color code this. The right hand side of the heart is the deoxygenated blood. The first top chamber is the right atrium. I'm just going to call RA, if that's okay. And then the more muscular chamber down below it is the right ventricle. Over on the other side, we have the left atrium, and it carries now oxygenated blood, so I'm going to label it as red. And it's going to squeeze blood into the left ventricle. So there's the 4 chambers of the heart. We've got some valves that we need to label. So this one right in here, remember on that right hand side, this is the tricuspid valve. It's got 3 flaps. And over on the left hand side, its counterpart, these valves are preventing backflow back into the atria. We don't want that. This is the bicuspid valve, 2 flaps. There are a couple of other valves in there as well, the semilunar valves. The one that is sort of along the way when we squeeze to the lungs, that's going to be this one right here. That is the pulmonary semilunar valve. Long name. And then over on the other side, where we are squeezing into the aorta, or the left ventricle, I should say, is squeezing into the aorta, that is the aortic. Oops. The aortic semilunar valve. And again, those are preventing backflow into the ventricles once they've squeezed. So there's the major chambers of the heart, the major valves of the heart. There are some blood vessels that we should probably know along the way here. Hopefully you can see the left ventricle here is going to squeeze, and then the path of blood is going to go up to the top here. This giant sort of horseshoe-shaped blood vessel, that's your aorta. That's the main pipe coming out of your heart that's going to carry blood all to your body. The main vessels bringing blood back to your heart, the bottom here is called the inferior vena cava. Inferior just means bottom. And then the main blood vessel that's draining the top half of your blood, or bringing that blood back to the heart, is the superior. It's on top, the superior vena cava. And then really the only other blood vessels we need to label on here, we've got, we'll switch some colors here. These blood vessels, there's that one and this one here. Those are actually going to carry, and we'll see this when we label the path of blood. Those are the blood vessels that carry blood from the right ventricle to your lungs. So those are called pulmonary arteries. And there's this misconception, we're going to talk about this eventually, that arteries always carry oxygenated blood. but that's actually not the case. Arteries are blood vessels that carry blood away from the heart. So again, this arrow is not showing that blood's going into it. I'm just labeling the structure. They're actually carrying blood away from the heart to the lungs. So those are pulmonary arteries. One going to the left lung, one going to the right lung. So that blood gets oxygenated. And then when it comes back, it is going to come back to the left atrium. And it's going to do that via, I guess there's two of them here, the pulmonary veins. Again, pulmonary means it's got something to do with the lungs. Pulmonary veins there. And you've got, sorry, this left-hand side gets a bit tight. Pulmonary veins are these structures here. So there's all the different blood vessels around the heart and the chambers of the heart itself. I guess the last thing we could label, it's probably not a bad idea. Remember, we've got the always important septum, right smack dab in the middle, and that is going to prevent deoxygenated blood from mixing with oxygenated blood. So in terms of pathway, here we go. I will go with a thicker pen if I can. Let's do a nice thick pen. We have some deoxygenated blood traveling up to the right atrium. Some of it comes from the bottom half of your body in the inferior vena cava. And then there's a bunch of deoxygenated blood coming from the upper half of your body. It enters the right atrium in the superior vena cava. So the pathway, well, let's do this along the way. So the pathway, we go vena cava. I'll just say that because it's like superior and inferior. The next stop along the way is that takes the blood into the right atrium. The blood is then going to go from the right atrium into the right ventricle, but it has to pass through that tricuspid valve. So right atrium, we hit the tricuspid valve, and that then moves into the right ventricle. The right ventricle is going to give a huge squeeze then, and it's going to give that big squeeze to push that blood all the way to the lungs. So when it does that big squeeze, remember the tricuspid valve is going to slap shut or snap shut, and those chordae tendineae are going to help the blood not sort of invert the valve, not push the valve and have it open the other way. I'm not going to draw chordae tendineae in there. Actually, I will. You don't need to. But these valves have those little chordae tendineae. And that way, that valve, it prevents it from opening up this way, because that would be bad. So that doesn't happen because the chordae tendineae physically won't allow it to invert. So the right ventricle is going to squeeze, and that is going to force blood through the pulmonary semilunar valve, and then it goes into the pulmonary artery, and it heads out to the lungs. So some of it's going to divert this way, it goes in behind, and it travels out like that. So let's label that down here in our list. We go from the right ventricle through the pulmonary semilunar valve, I'll just say pulmonary semilunar, sorry, in the interest of space. And then once we've gone through that valve, which is right here, now you can see that blood is traveling in those pulmonary arteries. So we go to the pulmonary arteries. one to the left, one to the right. And from the pulmonary arteries, we get to the lungs. And that's where gas exchange is going to happen. Lungs. Lungs. So now the blood becomes oxygenated. So I'm going to switch colors here and show this as red to represent that now we have oxygenated blood. That oxygenated blood is now going to come back to the heart via the pulmonary veins. So I'm cutting through some of the writing here, sorry. But it returns back to the heart, and it actually goes into the left atrium. So that's where that blood is entering. And it's entering in behind those other two in like that. So let's go down and put that in our list. We come from the lungs back to the heart via the pulmonary veins, and those drain into the left atrium. That left atrium is going to give a squeeze. That's going to force blood through the bicuspid valve into the left ventricle. So continuing on the path here, we now go through the bicuspid valve. That takes us into the left ventricle. And then the left ventricle, gives the biggest squeeze of all, because you got to get that blood all the way from your head to your toes. So it gives a really, really big squeeze. That blood is going to go through the aortic semilunar valve. And this is kind of hard to see because it's a 2D picture, but it goes in behind here, and then it comes through the aorta. And some of it's going to go out this way and feed your upper body and your arms, and some of it is going to go down this way. It actually would loop down through there, and that's going to go down to your lower extremities. So left ventricle, we then go through the aortic semilunar valve, that takes us into your aorta, the big pipe that's going to serve your whole body. Aorta, body. Your body is then going to use that oxygen in the blood, and it comes all the way, circles back to the heart, in through those superior and inferior vena cava. So that's the cycle. Hopefully you found that a little bit helpful now to see it all and sort of talk through it a little bit. Again, this diagram looks ridiculously complicated right now just because we've drawn stuff all over the page, but hopefully it's not too bad. You will be responsible, I can tell you this right now, you will be responsible for knowing all the different structures, blood vessels, chambers, parts of the heart. And you will be responsible to come up with a list like I did right here, the pathway, all the way from vena cava through to the body, back to the vena cava. So feel free to print yourself off maybe another one of these, or do a quick sketch of a heart and try it one more time. I guess I could have put, and again, I don't know if this matters, but the bicuspid valve here also would have had the chordae tendineae. Not that it really matters. Remember, your semilunar valves don't have the chordae tendineae. There is some structure and some pathway. Blood through your heart. Really, really amazing organ, right? You're at close to 1 billion beats potentially already in your lifetime. So super cool. If you have any questions about any of this, please hit me up in the next Zoom meeting. I'd love to see more than 2 of you. I'd love to have everybody there, to be perfectly honest. I'd love for you to check in. It'll help keep you honest too. It'll help keep you thinking about biology and keep you engaged. So please join me for our next Zoom meeting, or fire me an email. Ask me a question there. You can even ask to do a separate little Zoom meeting. I am more than happy to do that with you. So have fun practicing with the heart. There is a circulation assignment posted also on the website. It's got some more stuff on structure and function. Go cherry pick those questions. Some of the stuff in there, a lot of the stuff in there we haven't covered yet, but you could start that circulation assignment in addition to playing around with pictures like this. So hope to see you very soon in a Zoom meeting. Until then.